Hello everyone, welcome to our next training video in the series of Matthew. It's actually our last training video for the term, then it's the school holidays. While the holidays shortly thereafter, there's socials. I'll encourage you after this study, please organize social during the school holidays. And there'll be more details in the following emails, of course, what's going to happen. Training day is slightly shifted to the 21st of August, but more details will come of that. But focusing on our last part of the series, the King Revealed, Matthew chapter 11, verses 25 to 30. And in many ways, this is a summary of how we're supposed to understand what we've been seeing so far from chapter 8 after Sermon on the Mount, actually even earlier since chapter 2, all the way to now. And so I'd really encourage you to meditate on these words, read the commentary, wrestle with them, and hopefully they are clear to you. And you can see how the King has revealed himself. But before we get into the passage, there is a pattern I'd like you to see that starts in the Old Testament. And it's this. So for example, in the book of Genesis, Genesis 41, verse 8 to 16, we read about Pharaoh's dream. And then Pharaoh woke up. It had been a dream, and he's perplexed by his dream. In the morning, his mind was troubled. So notice this, very importantly. So he sent for all the magicians and wise men of Egypt. Notice that word there. And Pharaoh told them his dreams, but notice this, no one could interpret them for him. It was hidden from them. But then Pharaoh said to Joseph, I had a dream. Later on they called Joseph the prisoner. So notice his magicians, his wise men didn't get it, but he sent for the prisoner Joseph. He said, I had a dream and no one can interpret it, but I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. And notice how Joseph answers, I cannot do it. But this is important. Joseph replied to Pharaoh, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires. God will give it. And that's what we see. And this is not the first or the last time we see this pattern. Another great example is Daniel. Daniel chapter 2. I'd really encourage you to read the whole chapter. There's a lot of echoes actually in Jesus' prayer compared to Daniel. Look how it starts. Praise be to the name of God forever and ever. Very similar to Jesus, or Jesus similar to him. And again, the context is Nebuchadnezzar had a dream that nobody could interpret, none of his wise men. And so Daniel prays to God, and God gives him the understanding to interpret the dream. And that's where this prayer comes from. Wisdom and power are his. He changes times and seasons. He deposes kings and raises up others. Notice this. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to the discerning. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what lies in darkness, and light dwells with him. So in many ways, Daniel's prayer of thanksgiving echoes Joseph's confession, and we see this pattern play itself out in the Gospels as well, and in particular in Matthew's Gospel in a surprising way, because this is what you see when we consider the context of a passage. Who is coming to Jesus? Now, it's not in here, but chapter 2 is already a perplexing example. The Magi, who are Gentiles, most likely from Persia, they come and worship Jesus, but the teachers and religious leaders, the chief priests, they didn't. They didn't understand the significance of the star and the birth of Jesus. But look at Matthew chapter 8 to 11. Go read it again if you like. And already you've noticed who's been coming to Jesus. A leper, Gentile centurion, paralytic, a tax collector and his sinner friends, a man who lost his daughter, a woman with bleeding, 2 blind men. I mean, this is a very motley crew of people. But they have been coming to Jesus. They came to Jesus. While in the same section we've been seeing this. Contrary to this group of people, we've seen the religious leaders questioned, rejected, and opposed Jesus. And in chapter 12, which you'll pick up again in term 3, you really see this questioning, rejection, and opposition picking up strongly. But what's fascinating is that this entire phenomena of the outcasts and losers and dropouts of the Jewish society coming to Jesus, while the most excellent of men, the educated and upstanding citizens of Jewish society, didn't. And this doesn't alarm Jesus at all. In fact, he praises God, just like Daniel. I praise you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth. And interesting enough, the Father echoes Jesus' heart. Yes, Father, for this is what you were pleased to do. So both don't seem alarmed. Both are incredibly joyful about the fact that this group of people are coming to Jesus while this group is not. Why? And that's what we're going to see. So getting into the passage, we see God the Father and Son's plan in verses 25 to 27. Gives us a bit of clarity. At that time, Jesus, and of course, as far as possible, there are many things it doesn't answer, but gives us at least some clarity to understand the response. And Jesus says at that time, I praise you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth. All things belong to him. Because, so point number one, you have hidden these things, this first part of the plan, you've hidden these things from the wise and learned. Now, very importantly, Jesus is not knocking education because, just going back, if you consider the people who were coming, a Gentile centurion, a tax collector, Matthew chapter 2, a magi, these were all educated people. The ruler of the synagogue who lost his daughter would have not been an uneducated man, would have been an upstanding citizen. So the issue is not education or ability, that's very important to clarify, but rather an attitude that we actually see in the religious leaders, which is pride, and specifically the pride of believing I can know truth, I can know God, I can find God by myself, by my own authority, by my own ability. I am self-sufficient. I don't need anyone. It's that attitude of viewing ourselves as wise and learned. To those, God has hidden these things. And it's interesting in Matthew's Gospel that the religious leaders are called 3 times a brood of vipers. It starts in chapter 3 and continues all the way to chapter 23. And interesting enough, that's an echo again to Genesis chapter 3, because in Genesis chapter 3 we see the serpent's attitude. And again, those who follow him is like the serpent, a brood of vipers. And that attitude is, you don't need God. Don't let God define good and evil for you. You can define good and evil for yourself. It's that attitude, that pride, that serpent-like way of doing things, which in the end, Jesus, or the Father here, resists. He hides himself from them. He resists the proud. But conversely, he has revealed them to little children. These things, of course, refers to the kingdom of heaven and Christ being the Messiah and that the kingdom of heaven is at hand. These things are revealed to little children. Just as much as wise and learned does not refer to education or even status, so little children does not refer to age or size, but rather also an attitude. And here again, an attitude of dependence. Children in Jesus' day were totally dependent on their parents and had no status apart from their parents, and they knew it. Those who know how dependent they are, who know that they need Jesus and then ultimately come to Jesus, to them these things have been revealed. Yes, Father, but this is what you were pleased to do. So notice how Jesus' heart and the Father's heart are the same. And interestingly enough, Jesus then goes on to show who's executing this hiding and revealing. And he points out it's him. He's the one who's doing it. All things, these things have been committed to me by my Father. No one knows the Son except the Father. Quite a radical statement. Jesus is saying that the religious leaders, the scribes who study the scriptures, don't know God. The only one who knows God in his fullness is the Son himself, God the Son. He alone is Emmanuel, God with us. And no one knows the Father except the Son. So very exclusive here. Nobody can claim that they know God apart from the Son and the Father. And this is key, to whom the Son chooses to reveal them. It is by Jesus' choice to whom it is hidden and to whom it is revealed. He chooses, not us. And maybe to help understand this is a bit of an analogy, because the language of knowing here is relational. It's not Wikipedia or Google knowledge, it's relational knowledge, intimate knowledge, to be in a relationship. And Jesus is saying he chooses who he is with in a relationship. You can't force him, you can't demand it from him, it's freely given by him, sovereignly by him. In fact, that's how all real friendships work. You can't demand a friendship, it is given freely. And the Son chooses to whom he reveals himself. And he has chosen to reveal himself to little children, people who know they're dependent on him and need him, and hiding himself, refusing to give a relationship to those who think they're wise and learned, who think they don't need him. He resists the proud and chooses the broken. And if you actually go study the Old Testament, you discover this is God's heart always. And so how should we respond to this? Well, how should we respond to God's plan? Well, come to him. If you know you need him, if you know you need his mercy, if you know you're broken, just like all these people here knew that they were in desperate need of Jesus, then know what you need to do. You need to come to him. He's chosen to reveal himself to those who come to him, all you who are weary and burdened. If you know that you are weary and burdened, you are broken, then come to him. And he promises what you will experience when you come to him is rest. I will give you rest, and you will find rest for your souls. And moreover, what you will discover is as Jesus reveals himself to you and his mercy to you, you will discover that unlike the religious leaders whose relationships with people were conditional, their understanding of their relationship with God was conditional. What you will discover is an unconditional acceptance, an unconditional love, a free gift of mercy and grace, a real friendship. And ultimately you'll discover that Jesus' way, his yoke, to learn from him, you now have a gentle and humble Savior, Lord and King and Teacher. And you'll find that his burden is easy and it is light. It's not built on conditions in the sense of conditional acceptance, that you have to do certain things to get it. It's built on his mercy and his grace towards you. It's built on his choice to reveal himself to you who are totally dependent upon him. And that's liberating. It's a real love. It's a free gift. It's a choice at rest with him. And ultimately we can rest in trying to strive to find acceptance from God. We can rest knowing that we are accepted in him, and more than that, that in Jesus we now have a real relationship with God. We can know God as well. And so ultimately that's what we need to see, is God's plan of salvation playing itself out in Matthew's Gospel. And we shouldn't be alarmed with this plan playing out, that people who are proud, self-reliant, self-sufficient, who do not think that they need God, who think God owes them a favor, or it would be a favor to God if they befriended him. Jesus says no to them. In his sovereignty he says no, but to those who know they are broken, his answer is clear. It's a yes. And those who know they're broken will respond to his invitation. Come to me. And what will they discover? Rest. And as we'll see in chapter 12, it's because he's the Lord of the Sabbath. He's the one who's come to usher in God's rest. But that's all for now. Of course, there are many details and many mysteries in this passage. There is the whole discussion about God's sovereignty in this passage and human responsibility in this passage. I hope the leader's notes will help you there as well. But for now, that's what Matthew chapter 11, verses 25 to 30 is about.